Hey, this is V, and you're listening to Bite-Sized Book Reviews. The book I'll be talking about today is Homebody by Orson Scott Card. Technically, this is a haunted house story, although I don't think it really feels like one. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. The story is set in North Carolina and centers around a place called Bellamy Mansion, which is this big old house that's been standing abandoned for quite a long time. The main character, Don Lark, lost his 2-year-old daughter in a really tragic car accident several years ago, and he's had trouble, shaking off the shadows of that tragedy ever since. Before the accident happened, he actually had a house building business, but after his daughter passed away, he just couldn't really bring himself to build new houses anymore. So what he does instead is he buys old houses and renovates them before selling them off again. In some ways, he thinks of it as giving these houses a second chance at life, which is a chance that his daughter never got, since she never got to grow up and stuff. So this is something that he's still trying to work his way through when he discovers or comes across the Bellamy house, and he sees a lot of potential in it. And this becomes his next project. There are a lot of odd things though that happen as he begins to work on this house. For one thing, he notices once that there were these nail holes and stuff in the wall where he removed something, but then he comes back and the holes are gone. It's as though the wood had never been damaged at all, and he knows that that wasn't the case, and it doesn't really make any sense to him, but he also doesn't want to believe that there's anything supernatural going on. But then there's also these two weird old ladies who live next door, and they keep giving him these dire warnings. They keep telling him to just leave the house and let it die, and they want him to not renovate it because they tell him that renovating the house will somehow bring back something evil. And yeah, all of these warnings are going on as he's still going about his business and trying to bring some more quote unquote life into the house. And he meets this homeless woman who's also living in the house, and that becomes just one more problem in this long list of problems that he has. So what I meant by I didn't really feel like a haunted house story was that I think it started off really interesting. I was curious about what the story of the house was, with most cursed places or haunted places. I wanted to know more about how things became corrupted, how the twisting happened and why the house appears to be alive and evil and doing the things that it does. But I felt a bit the story didn't deliver on a lot of my expectations. So I said, in a typical ghost haunted house story, I would have expected to hear a lot more about the history. I would have expected it to delve into the events that sort of shaped the house into what it is today, but the story didn't really do any of that. It did talk a little bit about it, but it mostly chose to focus on this one crime that happened in the house before it became completely abandoned. And I think there were just a lot of minor things that didn't necessarily make a lot of sense to me. And I don't know if maybe I'm just on a different wavelength from how the characters and stuff think, but it chose to focus, less on the haunted house aspect and more on Don's relationship with the homeless woman. And I don't really understand how he goes from finding her to be kind of this nuisance that he allows to stay because he doesn't want to be the kind of man that throws a homeless woman out onto the street, to suddenly saying how much he loves her and want to marry her, and it becomes his main motivation throughout the entire later half of the book. I don't really understand how that relationship got from point A to point B, and because it is a main motivation, I think not understanding that transition and not really seeing how that relationship developed, I think was kind of a major flaw. So yeah, I think it started off kind of interesting. I find the neighbors really interesting, and the book does tie off at least the lines that it chooses to work on at the end, but overall I was kind of disappointed.